check, sound check, sound check. Can anyone hear us?
There's Aaron.
Yes.
Okay, we're just testing our sound.
Thank you.
Hi, testing. Testing. Sound of this up. Testing. Okay. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in a minute or two. So this is just your call to get any last minute food or drinks. Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. Great to see you. Welcome to Sunday Morning Live. I always think I'm going to say Saturday Night Live. I'm Paul Zakshevsky. I'm our Director of Programs and Communications, and really excited. In a moment, I'm going to invite Rabbi Cohen up to introduce both of this morning's speakers. But before I do, none of this would be possible, especially this breakfast, without the help of our SML crew. So huge hand of applause, please. And I want to let you know about a couple more upcoming Sunday Morning Lives we're going to have. On December 4th, we are really excited to welcome back Dan Mazel, who will be talking about anti-Semitism. So that's just a few weeks away. And then on January 15th, we'll have what is probably the last Sunday Morning Live in this building for a little while anyways. And we're going to be inviting Reza Aslan, the world famous Islam scholar, to come and speak here. It will be really exciting, and we'll have more information about that pretty soon. So without further ado, Rabbi Cohen.
Thank you, Paul. And in fact, thank you, Paul, for everything that you do to make this series happen. It's complicated. There are a lot of different pieces that need to come together in order to have a breakfast and speaker program like Sunday Morning Live. And really, Paul is the guy that makes it run. And so we're very, very grateful to Paul and for everything else that he does for our synagogue. He is our director of communications. And so, all of the publicity, all of the communications that you get from the synagogue, Paul is really the person who makes that happen, and we're so grateful. I also want to just say one more word about that Sunday Morning Live in January with Reza Aslan. I've been in touch with our local Islamic Society, and they have accepted our invitation to come. And so there'll be a group of people from our local Muslim community here that morning as well. Yeah. So this morning, thank you all for coming out. It's a beautiful morning. We could be outside, you could be outside, and you've chosen to be here this morning because I'm sure, even though each of us has a different take on what's going on politically, both here and also in Israel. We're here because we are aware that this is a significant moment in Israel's life, and it's a time of some dramatic changes, and we want to understand, as well as we possibly can, what is happening, what has happened, and also, even though nobody has a crystal ball, we would like to know as much as we can about where are things headed. We're very, very privileged this morning to have two very knowledgeable speakers. Rabbi Ira Youdovin is known to many of us, and really Ira is just going to be sort of setting things up a little bit and then turning things over to Professor Rivka Amado, who will be giving the primary presentation. Rabbi Youdovin is a proud member of our community, he told me to say, and thank you. We're so fortunate to have Rabbi Youdovin here. Rabbi Youdovin, for those of you that do not know, was the founding director of the Association of Reform Zionists of America. This is a very significant organization in the world of Zionism, and especially of North American Zionism. And as well, Ira was for many years the executive vice president of the Chicago Board of Rabbis. Before he came to Santa Barbara, that was his job. So he knows people. He's probably one of a handful of the members of our community who is best connected out in the Jewish world. And I always turn to him when I want to understand something, behind the headlines, behind the news. Ira is one of my absolute go-to people for deepening my own understanding. Professor Amado, just to give you a little bit of a sense, Professor Amado is a visiting professor at UCSB this year. She was invited to come for the year by UCSB's Department of Political Science. So at UCSB this year, right now she's teaching a class on Israeli politics and society, and with a specific focus on polarization and cleavages in Israeli political society. So, we couldn't ask for a better expert, really, to help us understand what's going on in Israeli politics right now. Her background is that she taught for many years at Bar Ilan University in Israel. She received her PhD from the University of Toronto. After coming to the States about 20 years ago, she has taught at Stanford, at Princeton, at Berkeley, and always with kind of a general focus on public ethics and civic culture in Israel. So she also happens, and this is a completely one of her other many sides to her, but she also has a deep interest and is creating and producing music which began as a exploration of her Sephardic roots, and has produced 3 albums. And so there's this other side to her that we're not probably going to get too much of this morning, but I think during the time that she's here this year, we really should be taking advantage of that as well. So, December 3rd. Thank you, Cantor. I'm so glad you stepped in. What day of the week is December 3rd? Saturday night, December 3rd. Fantastic. Okay, great. So without further ado, Rabbi Youdovin to kick things off.
Saturday night with the Sephardim. That sounds really exciting. Incidentally, the the business of being a proud member of CBB is not incidental. It's really central to my being here in Santa Barbara, thanks to the rabbis, the cantor. This is just a wonderful congregation. Yes, I've traveled around. When you get to a position of being the executive director of something or other, you get invited by synagogues around the country to deliver the same speech until you get bored with yourself. And I've seen a lot of synagogues. This one is the very best. A funny thing happened on our way to this morning's program. We had planned to focus on the seemingly endless cycle of Israeli elections. And it was a pretty safe bet that the party who won seats in the new government would still be deep in negotiations for places in the coalition. That's a who gets what auction. That normally takes several weeks, and in the past 4 go-rounds has failed to produce a stable government. We thought we'd be right at the beginning of the process. But last week, a funny thing happened. The seemingly endless cycle ended. We'll probably see the same haggling over ministerial positions, budgets, and what the coalition promises to do. But in fact, it's already started. And when the dust finally settles, some days or weeks from now, Bibi Netanyahu will again be prime minister, a position he's held on and off for most of the past quarter century. Now, that may be good news for Israel, but was terrible news for Paul, who had gotten out the advertising for the first iteration of this morning, and then learned several days ago, no, got to change it. And he did, although it caused him to work on Shabbat, for which I think I will have to pay in the world to come. But thank you very, very much for making this all happen. Israel's new government has been condemned, it's been mocked by many of the country's strongest supporters of Israel, even before its members, and this is key to this morning, even before its members have been named. For example, the criticism, Tom Friedman of the New York Times, who is often criticized for being, or condemned for being anti-Israel. In fact, he's very strongly pro-Israel. But he writes the following, and I quote, "Imagine you woke up after the 2024 US presidential election and found that Donald Trump had been reelected and chose Rudy Giuliani for his attorney general, Michael Flynn for defense secretary, Steve Bannon for commerce secretary, evangelical leader James Dobson for education secretary, Proud Boys former head Enrique Tarrio for homeland security, and Marjorie Taylor Greene as the White House spokesman." Friedman ended his column, "The Israel we knew is gone." Now, one of the nicest things about living a long life, as I'm privileged to be living, is that you remember things other people have forgotten, or they happened before they were born. And I go back to 1977, that's a half century ago. My position at the time was running the Israel desk at the National Office of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, which is now the Union for Reform Judaism. It's the mother church of North American Reform Judaism. I was on the Israel desk, heading the Israel desk. We received a phone call from Jerusalem. A phone call, remember those? This was before fax, cell phones, and texting, telling us that Menachem Begin, of a party called Likud, had been elected prime minister, ending decades of Labor Party dominance, going back to the early days of Aliyah before the state. The election was so radical, it was called Hamapecha, the earthquake. And people were saying, the Israel we knew is gone. Well, it was, and it wasn't. Israel is still Israel. It continues to change as its population grows and faces a changing constellation of challenges and opportunities it faces. But it's still a tiny nation And it's still able, despite the external threats and the turbulence within, it's still able to have a free and fair election. A free and fair election. It's no small feat in today's world, as we Americans know better than anybody else. And that Israel has elected a right-wing government should not come as a surprise. The country has been moving to the right for a long time. In 1999, 30% of Israelis characterized themselves as right-wingers. By 2021, that number had risen by 64%. Now let's take a look at the numbers and then we'll listen to why. Netanyahu could and perhaps should have won the previous elections. Let's take a look at the numbers. There's a slide up, I can't see it behind me. You will see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parties that could be classified as right-wing. That means 72 seats. And you know how Israel elects its prime ministers. It needs a majority of 61. That's a very, very comfortable majority. And Netanyahu should have become prime minister with a 10-vote majority. That's a lot. However, 3 of the parties in the 7 are right-wing. They had been part of Likud, and they broke away because they didn't want to continue Netanyahu in the position of prime minister for various reasons. So they took out 20 votes. Their parties had been formed to a great extent anti-Netanyahu. That's what held them together. And you take 20 votes out, that leaves them with 52. Not only did the rebels take their parties out, they gave them to the opposition. They became part of the opposition, giving it 58 seats. That's still 3 seats short of a majority. And then Yair Lapid did a radical thing. He brought in a Palestinian party, Ra'am. And that gave them 61 seats, 62 seats, varies. And they became the government. And that government lasted for a year. And it broke apart as it had to break apart because the only thing that united the people around the table was anti-Bibi. So you had right-wingers sitting with left-wingers, and that precluded their dealing with anything significant except they passed the budget, because any one of the parties withdrawing from the coalition brings it down. It brings it below 61 seats, which ultimately happened. Now, how did Bibi do this? This is slide 2. 3 things. A, he eliminated the anti-Bibi people in the coalition. So he put it together with 4 members. One, his own Likud party, which had been cleansed, purged of opposition. The United Torah Judaism, which is a Haredi party for the Ashkenazim, for the Jews whose background is in Eastern Europe. And also Shas, which is listed as Sephardic party, which is listed as Haredi. It is and it isn't. And I'll leave it to Rivka if she wants to explain that. I really can't. And also, he worked to bring together, he knew that the that the extreme right-wing votes were there, but some of them were lost in small parties that couldn't reach the threshold. If you don't get 4 seats, then your votes are thrown out. So he brought them together, 3 parties, and you'll be hearing a lot about one of them, 2 of them, Otzma Yehudit, which is Itamar Ben-Gvir, and a second party, National Religious Zionism, which is Smotrich, and a third, Noam, which is homophobic. And that's quite a government to deal with. Anyway, they won, and they have a comfortable majority. The opposition, the anti-Bibi forces are in the opposition, and that won't matter. And so we have a right-wing, Israel's most extreme right-wing government in its history. And before we schrei Gewalt, or Göttingen, take your choice, let's remember that when Israel, when in 1977, when Begin was elected, people schrei Gewalt. Who would have thought at that time that this disciple of Lev Jabotinsky, who wanted Israel to embrace both sides of the Jordan, who would have thought that Begin would be at Camp David giving away all the land captured in the 1967 war, all of it, in exchange for peace with Egypt? And who would have thought that Ariel Sharon, the architect and implementer of Israel's occupation on the West Bank and Samaria, who would have thought that he would have evacuated Gaza? All he said is Jews shouldn't be there. And after a prolonged national debate, they weren't. Sometimes it's the righties, the left-wingers, who do the radical things that make peace. So I don't have a crystal ball. I was hoping to use Rabbi Cohen's, but he doesn't have one either. So we'll turn to somebody who perhaps does. And it is important at this point to withhold our controversy. You know, let's find out, let's discover things at the root. Let's listen rather than talk. Let's learn rather than trying to teach by shouting. This is a moment that is very, very important, that we hang together despite our differences. And as Rabbi Cohen said in a sermon a week ago, to understand that the person we're disagreeing with is a human being. And to see in this person you are fighting with your own image and the image of God. And so this is the first step, I think, or the second step after Rabbi Cohen's sermon last week, in a process here at CBB of learning. And for that, we turn to Professor Amado.
Okay, so good morning to everybody. Thank you so much for coming. In this beautiful day, as Rabbi Cohen said, thank you so much, Ira, for the introduction. Thank you, Rabbi Cohen, for gracious introduction. And also thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you and share some thoughts or some insights about the recent election in Israel. So before we start, how many people have been in Israel before? Wow, that's wonderful. Great. Do you have family in Israel or friends? Yeah, good, good. Okay, wonderful. All right, so what I would like to do today, I would like to divide my comments into 4 parts. The first one, I would like to give you a sort of like a brief overview of the electoral system in Israel. And then to ask the question, why this election was different from other recent elections? And then move to the other perspective, which is why this election was like other recent election. So don't get confused, okay? And last one, the last part is I would like to talk about to bring some policy comments about the implication of this election. Okay. So as we all know, Israel is a parliamentary system with proportional representation. And what does it mean? that we have many parties representing interests of many constituencies. This election, we had 40 parties that were competing with each other, and only 10 parties received enough votes, which is the minimum, as we say, is four mandates to get into the Knesset. When I say 4 votes, it means this is the threshold, which is 3.25% of the vote. Now, at the outset, in the pre-independence Israel, there were 2 major factions. We had the Labor Party, which is the Mapai, the old Mapai, which led by Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel. And then we had the Cherut or Likud, which was led by Begin, Menachem Begin. However, with the growth and the increased political engagement, more specialized parties representing specific groups emerged. And most obviously, the ultra-Orthodox was first refused actually to be part of the political process in Israel. Eventually, they joined the parliament. The other element is we have proportional representation, which guarantee a coalition. And so we need in Israel, in order to have a coalition, we need 61 votes out of 120. Coalition governments are less stable than 2-party system with one clear winner. So in coalition partners, some parties can withdraw and then the coalition collapse. So after the new election, the president is asking the leader of the largest party to form a government. And if this is not working, then the leader of the other larger party is asked to form a government. And if this is also fail and there is no solution, then we have a new election. And that's actually what happened. Is the last 4 recent election, it was very difficult. I'm sorry, the third elections, it was very difficult to form a coalition. That's why we keep having, this election. And the 4th election, eventually, they managed to have a coalition, which was actually a precedent because the prime minister, which was Naftali Bennett of Yamina, they led by the Yamina party, he had only 7 mandates and he became the prime minister. So think about it. He was not representing the larger party in Israel, but because of this, a coalition complexity, then he managed to become a prime minister. Okay, so okay, that's also important in terms of the registers of parties. That's these parties that they have some, if they declare that they have some, I would say, a campaign against Israel or instigation against Israel, they are not allowed to be registered as a kosher, what we call a kosher party. Okay, so let's start with our question this morning, and I would say, "Ma nishtana halayla hazeh?" What really happened? Okay, so why this election is different than the other recent election? First of all, it's important to point out that the voter turnover of this election was 71%, actually 71.3%, the highest since 2015. Now, the big question, and we are going to talk a little bit about it, whether this coalition is going to be stable for the next 4 years. We don't know yet, but we'll examine this question. So if you look at the distribution of the votes among the parties, we see here that we have the Likud, which is the largest party, the right-wing party, with 32 seats. This Likud, this party is led by Benjamin Netanyahu. Then we have 14 seats, which is the ultra-right wing, and it's a combination, as Ira mentioned before, of the National Zionist religions with Otzma Yehudit and Noam, and they are led by two people that you probably will hear about them a lot, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir. Then we have 11 seats that Shas brought. Shas is the ultra-Orthodox Mizrahi Jews, and it's led by Aryeh Deri. And the last one is 7 seats by United Torah Judaism, and it's led by Yitzhak Klonfef. Before it was Gafni. So altogether we have 64 seats out of 120 majority. Now, this group of parties, they seem to cohere. And it is, I would say, is the most homogenic coalition ever in Israel. All on the right or far right, Likud, Shas, and ultra-Orthodox parties, they all worked very nicely, well, together in the past. The ultra-right wing parties have now, we have to remember that they have nowhere else to go. So it's not so easily to withdraw. Now, it is important to know that the success of the right-wing parties in many respects is due to Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu's genius and brilliancy. And I would like to explain. Bibi, he recognized that he is not popular among many of his party, the Likud party. Some people in the Likud party didn't like his leadership, or still don't like his leadership. And there was, as you know, the last election really focused about, the campaign was Bibi or not Bibi, Bibi or not Bibi. Anyway, so what he was trying to do, because he's so brilliant, he was trying to not to maximize the votes for his own party, which is the Likud. Instead, what he was doing, he worked quietly with the other parties, especially Shas and the two ultra-Orthodox, ultra-right-wing parties to increase their share of the vote and to create a strong bloc. And this was successful. The Likud and the United Torah held steady, but Shas gained only 2 seats. They started with the previous one, it was 9, now it's 11. And the right-wing parties jumped from 6 to 14, which is really a dramatic increase. So Bibi he was doing this by letting people that it's okay to vote for Shas, and working closely with the right-wing parties to get them to join a unified party so they would get enough votes to pass the threshold. If he wouldn't do this, if he wouldn't push them to get together, to merge together, the likelihood of the Tzionut Datit, which is the religious Zionist, the likelihood of them passing the threshold was very, very low. Okay, so what we can say is, in conclusion, you can say that a stable coalition of right-wing parties with 64 seats with good discipline and likely to hold together and share many objectives, Likud, Shas, and United and UTH, they all work together, and we are hoping that it's going to work. So now this appears to be accurate, but let's think, or let's go deeper and maybe try to assess these results from a different perspective. So why this election is like all other recent elections? If we think about, if we look at the numbers, and you have here the numbers on the board, you see that nothing really much changed. If we count the actual votes, we see the same distribution as found in the last few elections, and almost a tie between the two blocks, the right wing and the center left. And the outcome of this election was not due to dramatic changes in the voter preferences. The right didn't really win, rather the left lost. And the change were mostly organizational, which it's about the voting rules and party and inter-party cohesion. The right wing is not larger, but better organized. And this is really crucial because they were more focused and more organized. They managed to succeed in this election. The ultra-right wing has more power than ever before, but they got it mostly from Yemina. Yemina was the old party led by Bennett, Naftali Bennett and Shaked. And as we know, that this time Ayelet Shaked didn't manage to pass the threshold. So we are talking about maybe 6 seats or 6 mandates that actually moved from one Yemin, one right, to the other Yemin, which maybe it's a little bit extremist. And some people who are in the right wing, and they didn't like to vote for the Likud because they didn't like Bibi, so they decided to vote for the right wing, the ultra right wing. Now, what happened in the left? The left center and the left wing, which for years defined itself in terms of two-state solution, peace with Arabs, reductions in terrorism, and more economic prosperity, has become lacklusters. What does it mean? They become disorganized. Lapid failed to build a bridge with parties that he needed. And there was much infighting within the parties in the left. The center failed to unite labor and merit. This was also another crucial point in this election. And also to keep the Arab list, the joint list, together. Labor Party got only 4 seats. And Meretz got 0 seats. They didn't pass the threshold. One of the Arab party, Balad, failed to make the threshold. So if Meretz and the Arab party gotten a few thousand more votes, or had the labor accepted Meretz into its ranks and had Balad remain part of the joint list, the likeliest result of this election would have been 60-60, which is a tie, which are actually reflecting the whole voting numbers. So I want really to elaborate a little bit. Let me explain. Election law in Israel requires 30.25% of the vote to get a seat. If not, votes are lost. This election, 10% of the votes were wasted on small parties, more from the center and left parties. Just Meretz and the Arab party alone had most of the lost votes. And I think I have another slide here. Yeah. Here you can see how many votes Meretz got and how many votes, like what is the total of these two parties. If they would agree beforehand, and this is, again, it's coming back to the whole idea of focus and organization. If they would agree beforehand that their vote would shift to the other parties, like the center-left parties, they will have 60 seats, another tie. So no real change in the voter preferences, but significant changes in party votes due in large to vested votes below the threshold. So if I want to restate what I just said, is that the 4 recent elections produced about the same number of raw votes. Raw votes, what I mean raw votes, I don't mean actual seat in the Knesset, for the right wing and the left center in this election. So what we can see also that the same deep divisions and fragmentation are here, which is a reflection of the division and fragmentation that we have in the Israeli society. 2 center parties led by Lapid and Gantz are still here. The Labour Party limps past the threshold with only 4 seats. And yeah, I want to also to think about Labour Party, only 4 seats. Labour Party is actually the big party that led by the Mapai, you know, with Ben Gurion, and then we have Golda Meir, and then we had Rabin and Peres, you know, it was a big party. And now it's only 4 seats. So think about the legacy of this old socialist party. Okay, so I have some additional reflection here about these elections. So within this provisional coalition, Shas and United Torah, and they are known as they are known as actors, you know, as active actors, but ultra right wing is new, and we really don't know exactly what they are going to do in terms of, you know, their so far their appetite is quite high in terms of asking for ministerial positions. Tension within the Likud, and it may indicate or give us some indication that it is possible that some will defect the Likud and maybe move to Gantz's party. And it happened before. So some people just don't like Bibi leadership style. Some are really fed up with him. And also the fact that he is still engaging, or they have all this criminal allegation against him. It's not working for him. So the coalition of the 4 right wings may not be as stable as we think that it is. Okay, I don't know why it doesn't go down, but I want to get the other slide. The previous slide. Yeah, it's. You want to go to the back? Oh, yeah, okay. So now I want to go to the last part of my presentation today is about the policy implication. Okay, so first of all, we'll start with the biggest winner of this election is Itamar Ben-Gvir, the right wing, which is now consolidated, and many remain. So if the coalition holds, we can expect actually the following development. So we might have a stable government, solid coalition, but we know that I don't think that Bibi, or even if Gantz was in power right now, they will have they will devote some of their efforts to deal with the fragmentation in Israeli society. So this is not the first priority. The first priority is security, then economy, and then social issues. we are going to expect there will be more funding to ultra-Orthodox institutions, and we already heard that Bibi is going to give the Shas and the Haredi parties. He's gonna triple maybe their subsidies and the allocations that each family or each yeshiva bucher gets from the government. There will be probably more Shabbat restrictions. There will be more Jewish and less democratic state, more funding for settlements, less free speech. There will be tougher stands on Israeli Arabs. They will ask for more loyalty from them. Tougher stands on Arabs in the territories. We are going to see more stronger institution for internal security, which is one of the biggest problem right now, especially with the Bedouin down south, and the robbery of farmer equipment and produce up north by Arabs. There will be move to restrict, from the legal point of view, the legal system. There will be more move to restrict, and they are actually talking about it very loudly. And it's coming actually from all camps, not necessarily from the right wing, but also from the left or the center left, to trim the power of the Supreme Court, allow a simple majority in the Knesset to override court decisions. There will be the question of who is a Jew. The definition of a Jew is going to take also some more, there will be more public debate around it. Issues of illegal immigration, draft of yeshiva bochors or yeshiva students. And in the good side, maybe we're going to have some new treaties with some new Arab countries, peace treaties. Okay. Okay. Now, in the broader scale, what we see is that this election reinforce or remind us that the Oslo Accord is basically, it's a dying document. There is no partner for peace. We lost merit, so even there is nobody that can even, advocate for any kind of two-state solution. Continuing concern with crime and violence in the Arab community. Increased concern, as I said before, about illegal immigration to Israel. Continuing problem with non-Jewish Russian, the whole idea of conversion, and reinforce of the rise of the right-wing nationalism around the world. Okay, so here I want to say maybe to comment on this, that maybe the rise of Itamar Ben-Gvir or the whole right-wing nationalism, it's not distinctive to Israel, but it's something that it's going on, like it's part of the international mood about the rise of the right wing. And we see it in other countries like Poland, Hungary, Italy, France, Sweden, South America, and even here in the US. So the mood is actually a reaction of diverse layers in the population to globalization. Globalization, it played an important role in driving up support from the populist movement, particularly of the right-wing kind. And globalization is viewed as a threat to the survival of diverse groups, mostly the lower class, that they feel that their jobs are in danger, that they are going to lose their job. There are concerns not only about their jobs, but also they are concerned about the erosion of their traditional values, about their family values. So the rhetoric of the liberal ideologies, such as human rights, is a threat to this group, and that's the response is really to move to the right. Okay, now I want you to contemplate on this. Bibi has 3 more weeks to form a government. Ben Gvir and other parties are asking for a lot, and Bibi has limits. Bibi, as we know, is a fantastic, skilled politician who speaks more radically than he acts. He is really conservative, and he may not like wild, unskilled youngsters. Well, and he also, it's important to know that he is getting on in years, and he would like to be remembered as a great statement in the history. And so one day maybe he would like to have his face on the 200 shekel bill. So he might just decide to dump this young and disciplined and ultra right-wing partner for someone safer. And there is a potential partner waiting in the wings, and this is actually Benny Gantz with his 12 votes for an expanded coalition. But so we can say never. And don't count it, over the next few weeks. Maybe it's not going to happen soon, but it might happen in a year from now. Of course, if the coalition will survive. So ask yourself, if you wanted to go down in history as one of Israel's greatest leaders, how would you like to be remembered in the final chapter of your story? That will be interesting to think about it, yeah? Well, Netanyahu is both smart and he's thinking of his place in the history books, like leaders that he admires. If you ask him, who are the leaders that you admire? He would tell you, Herzl, Churchill, and another one that you probably didn't hear about, Arnson, that he was the head of Nili. Perhaps right-wing nationalism is the wave of the future, and he intuited it. If so, the coalition paves the way to his future. But these other 2 partners, Shas and ultra-Orthodox, while right-wing and not ultra-right-wing nationalists willing to spill blood over the West Bank, they are not going to do it. So if you're Benjamin Netanyahu, what would you do to maximize your place in history of books? Think about it, and that's where I say, thank you so much. Okay. Okay, if you have any question to me and Ira, please raise it. Okay, you're going to do moderated? Yeah, okay, good.
Is this on? Yes. Okay. Susan Lichtenstein. Okay. A new member of our community. Susan.
Thank you so much for those really interesting comments. It's very enlightening. Given the demographic changes and trends, do you think it's possible for Israel to remain both a democracy and a Jewish state?
Well, that's actually a very good question. And believe it or not, it's, I actually thought that that's going to be the center of this election, where is the direction that Israel is taking? And it's really about who they, what is the identity? We're talking about the Jewish and national identity of Israeli. If you ask me personally, I do believe that this combination is feasible. We can still have Jewish state and democratic state. We can do it. Of course, we have to find, we have to go through this self-discovery process, and we have to redefine what does it mean to be a Jew, and what does it mean to have a democratic state. what's the implication of this? But still, I think that the two can walk together. That's my personal view. Okay.
Thank you. Stephen Stone.
Thank you. I now have an understanding that years of reading have not accorded to me, so of Israeli politics, and I'm sure there's a lot more to learn. Given the identity of Israel is very much wrapped up in the IDF, I actually have two questions, if I may. And Haredim are non-participatory. Is it predictable that there's going to be a reaction to this government that gives the privilege of non-service to Haredim? Second, it seems to be clear that there's some income redistribution taking place at a time of economic distress, with money flowing from those who are paying more taxes to those who are paying less. What consequences do you imagine might occur? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your very important question. And I would say this is one of the most painful issues in the Israeli politics right now, but also I would say contribute to the polarization, and even I would say even more to the animosity between the Haredi population, which growing, that they're growing faster, and the secular in relation to not serving in the army, and also not working, not going on to work, but it's not only not participating in the workforce and living out of subsidies that coming from taxpayer, but also they refuse to educate their kids with basic subject or disciplines that are really necessary for their own personal development, like we're talking about English, we're talking about mathematics, and the implications are really long-term, because eventually these little kids who are not getting this basic education, they will not be able to even if the policy is going to change and they are not going to get more subsidies in the future, they are going to be below the poverty line because they are not going to have this necessary skills to be part of the working force. So that's really very dangerous, I would say, in terms of of this group of people. Unfortunately, I don't think that this is going to change. I think that Bibi is going to give them more money. And at least for now, and as I said, if the composition of the coalition is going to change, let's say that Gantz is going to come and we are going to have more of, I would say, a unified government that involves some people from the center, so maybe the policy would change. But for now, I'm not very optimistic, unfortunately.
Stephen, what was your second question, or did you get them both in there? Yeah, both. Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Beth,
you asked just a minute. You asked about drafting. Yeah. Yeah. So again, I think it's going to be the same. I don't think that there will be more Haredi who is going to join the army. Although some are joining, but it's a very small percentage. I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. Can you?
Why don't we move on to thank you, Beth Katz.
Well, my question was similar, but you said there's going to be a new draft, but I guess that is not for the Haredi, as what you just explained. But the other question that I have is, in terms of defining who is a Jew, is there going to be any move that the secular can get married in Israel without having to go to Cyprus to have a private ceremony and then come back and have a celebration? I mean, and isn't the secular population just so annoyed with paying higher taxes to give to the Haredi? without even having the right to their own
Yeah.
rights.
Well, actually, this is the campaign of Lapid and I would say the center left parties about allowing civil marriages in Israel and actually reducing the monopoly of the chief rabbinate in Israel. And as I said, I don't think that that changes. They are not going. The status quo. Let's say that Bibi is not going to touch the status quo right now. Everything is going to be mostly the same, and maybe even a little bit more, as I said, more funding to the ultra-Orthodox. And because right now the first priority, at least in the Bibi agenda, is to take care of his trial, the allegation, and security, mostly the Iran nuclear ability to develop nuclear weapons. Yes.
Gary Linker.
I'm glad you mentioned the notion about the trial, because it's one thing for him to consider his long-term future and the legacy he wants to lead, but he's under a tremendous potential to be convicted.
Yeah.
And so if you're Bibi, can you tell us what his options are for dealing with that?
Well, first of all, so far, it's some of the allegation against him dropped. So we have to keep this in mind. Nobody knows what's going to happen, but I'll tell you one thing, that he insisted that the trial will continue because there was some pressure, especially from Smotrich, to abolish the allegation, we call it afarat emunim, which is violation of trust. But Bibi actually want the trial to be continued. Maybe, and that's again, it's only my guess. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not a prophet, but maybe eventually he will reach some sort of plea bargaining deal, and the whole saga will be over. Maybe, I don't know. Yes.
Avram Mordechai, did you have a question?
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. One thing you didn't mention in your main presentation and just came up in subsequently was Iran. Do you see any change in policies between this new coalition and the former government? And in view of perhaps things becoming more critical with Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon, what do you foresee?
Well, I guess that Bibi is going to be more aggressive in terms of, pushing forward his agenda or his policy. But also I want to remind you that Bibi now is not working with Trump. He's working with Biden. So it's a different ball game. So we'll see how Bibi is going to deal with Trump. That's going to be actually very interesting to see how the two of them are going to get along together. And so again, we never know. Yeah. Yeah, it can. But okay, you see, Israel, it doesn't operate in a vacuum, there are a lot of changes, not only in the Middle East. I would say that if Bibi will be able to reach peace treaties with new Arab countries, that will have an impact on the Iran problem. That's what I see. Yeah. And also there will have an impact on the economy of Israel, which is going to be flourishing, just flourishing. And even now, Israel is considered to be very prosperous, and even somebody defined her number 8 in terms of number 8 empires all over the world. So in terms of, it's not only economic, but also military and technological and scientifically. So yeah, so we have to keep in mind that Israel is a strong, really strong, powerful nation. Yeah.
Paul.
Thank you. A wonderful presentation. Since you're talking about the fact that Israel doesn't exist in a vacuum, I'm wondering if I remember correctly, Bibi had closer ties to Putin, at least in earlier days. Now that he's back in power, how do you see that playing out vis-a-vis the Ukraine war?
Well, that's a very good question, and I'm not sure I have an answer for this. I really don't. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay.
Rivka, I know Rabbi Ira has a final thought or question also, but I was wondering, you touched on, or you put on this slide a couple of topics that you didn't really expand on at all, and I'm just curious, particularly, for example, the non-Jewish Russians.
Yeah.
Can you just say a little bit more about how this new coalition and I assume it's the Haredi and the ultra and the religious religious Zionists that might be more of a in conflict with the non-Jewish Russians.
Yeah. Well, in terms of numbers, there are probably close to 1 million non-Jewish Russian in Israel right now. They are growing. Yeah. And it's very complicated because they don't want to go through the Orthodox conversion, and they said, from their perspective, they said, well, we want to be like all other secular Jews who doesn't observe. So so that's going to be a continuing problem that was not dealt effectively, in previous. Now, the other thing I want to tell you that I just read, I think it was yesterday, that they are going to do an amendment to the Chok HaShvut. Chok HaShvut is the law of return, and they want to abolish or to erase one. If you, let's say, a grandchild of a Jewish father or mother, you are entitled to Chok HaShvut. You are entitled to get Israeli citizenship. Now, the Haredi, and I mean the ultra-Orthodox and the ultra-right, they want to erase this section. In other words, if you are a grandchild who has some, ancestors who are Jewish, you are not be able to come to Israel and get citizenship. Yeah. So that's a change that I just, saw it yesterday, which is alarming, I must say, because it can tell us a little bit which is the direction that they are taking, and in terms of they might change the law of return, the definition of the law of return. Yeah.
Well, I want to add my thanks for a very, very illuminating presentation and morning. Rabbi Ira?
Rivka, thank you very, very much. It's the truth is, when I've done it in previous years, I've relied on writing and the wisdom of people like Rivka, quoting people who are actually on the spot. So this morning we got the real deal.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. The Bibi trial. This business of Bibi saying, I don't want anything special, is a ruse. He won't have to. If you're betting on something, bet against Bibi being convicted or even tried. That's a safe bet. Why? He now has the government. The government appoints the Minister of Justice. Mm-hmm. The Minister of Justice appoints the court, who sits on the court. So that you can bet that the people who are sitting on the new court and making judgment of Bibi are Bibi's people. So, it'll just fall, I think, by the wayside. There won't be any big...
like a guy from Chicago.
Vote early, vote often. That's interesting. But that's point number one. The big thing with the justice is a move to abolish judicial review, so that the court, who now sort of has the right to overturn decisions of the Knesset, it'll be reversed, and that the Knesset, by vote of one vote can abolish a basic law, which is a step toward the Constitution. That's dangerous. Jewish democratic. Depends on how you define Jewish. And we've given that away and we shouldn't. You know, is anybody in this room would have trouble with a Israel that is Jewish as we see Jewish and democracy? No, I mean, we see it in the same breath. Jewish as defined by the right means the kind of orthodoxy, and that becomes the model. With that, there's a conflict between democracy and people who want to be ruled by the rabbis. And that's going to be a face-off with this administration. Concerning the longevity of this government, I think it'll go the distance or close, but don't bet on that. I think what will be determined the next election in a very, very cracked and difficult to see crystal ball. We talk about these big things, you know, that are being done with the Palestinians. Many of the things that the Haredi parties are pushing for affect the lives of ordinary people. We'll find that they love to go to the movies on Friday night. The cinema is now closed. They want to take public transportation. They want to visit, they live in Jerusalem, want to visit their grandmother in Tel Aviv. They will continue the prohibition on Shabbat intercity busing. They'll find the laws of kashrut are more stringent. They'll find they won't be able to do this, they won't be doing, streets will be closed on Shabbat. And that will impinge on their lives to the point where they will not want to continue it. They'll want to discontinue, they'll want to end it or modify it, and they will vote, they'll be willing to vote against a far-right, religious-oriented coalition. The trick is there now, will the left and center-left organize itself? And you were brilliant in touching on that as being a major issue. The left doesn't exist anymore. We could probably debate that. The left doesn't exist. But if they could move toward the center, as Clinton did, to get a second term, and if the center can organize, Lapid is he's survived in the Knesset now for 11 years, so he can do that. But he hasn't interfaced well with other parties. I think there's more of a chance of Gantz not leaving the coalition. He tried that once, and he got nothing for it except trouble. If Gantz will come down, and the new party, the Zionist camp, which is led by a former Likud leader, Gideon Sa'ar, and some generals, if they could get together and then bring in some new people, if they could better organize the liberal religious movements, they could have a very strong center. And that strong center would win. So if you are, if you're wondering, that I think, and I hope I'll be around in 4 years or so I'll be able to, either show up with a big smile or pie on my face. And I had one question: what can we do financially? Support the organizations that are working toward a shared society. And this congregation is already doing that through our affiliation with Givat Chaviva, the international school. These are institutions that are looking forward to a world in which one state, two states, Jews and Palestinians have to live together. And there is a very active movement now pushing that together, and we're already involved, and we should look to expand our involvement. That, I think, is the way to in Israel that we can embrace and continue to draw inspiration from. Anyway, Rivka, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming out this morning. Enjoy the rest of your beautiful Sunday.